Might as well start. Gonna open the meeting. Reading of the meeting's notice, please.
The Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Erie, PA will meet in special session on Thursday, May 16th, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. in the library at Erie High School, 3325 Cherry Street, Erie, PA, to receive the report of the Secretary of Education, to consider the approval of a curriculum purchase, and for any other business that may come before the board, by request of the President, Frank Petrunger, Jr.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Alexandrovich? Here. Mr. Cassillo?
Excused.
Mr. Fabrizi?
Here.
Mrs. Feeney?
Here.
Mr. Harkins?
Here.
Mrs. McNair? Mr. Spagel?
He's on his way.
Mr. Titus?
Excused.
Mr. Petrunger?
Here. Pledge of allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. Mr. Wachner, could you please lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Hearing of citizens, persons desiring to speak for 5 minutes must submit their request in writing to the Secretary's office at least 1 week prior to the board meeting. All others may speak for 3 minutes. We have no 5-minute speakers. Would anybody like to speak for 3 minutes? Come right up to the microphone. If you can sign the paper there with your name. All right. Over here, sir.
Mr.
Sir, over here in the middle.
We've changed.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome, Secretary Rivera, Special Assistant Zogby, Superintendent Polito, Assistant Superintendent Arbursky, honored school board members, and all guests. Thank you for being here. Certainly appreciate it. And we do appreciate, I wanted to mention that we are grateful for all that is done by the state for the Erie School District, the resources that you offer, the focus that you give. And it's really appreciated, and we want to thank you. There's an item I wanted to highlight, however, and it's not anything that we can't solve. It just means something that we can work together on. In the state of Pennsylvania, 38% of the students are minority or people of color, and we have about 5.2% of teacher ratio. In the city of Erie, it's 62%, and there's about 3% black and minority teachers. And so there's something that we need to do about this. Now, I have spoken with Saxon Nelson, who is an assistant to Noah Ortega, and Saxon has a plan. And I just wanted to mention it because I think it needs focus. The Erie School District has been working on this for a number of years, but recently there's new zeal to really bring this problem to attention. And we're working on a plan that's much aligned with what Saxon has offered. And so I believe that if we all lean in, we all work on this together, we can get this solved for the most vulnerable and marginalized of our kids, but not just for the kids, but for all of us. So I wanted to bring this up, Mr. Secretary, while you're here. I wanted to bring it to note. I appreciate Superintendent Polito's direction on this, and let's see if we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak for 3 minutes? Not seeing anybody, we will move on. We'll move to the financial improvement plan. Mr. Pedro Rivera. Yes, sir.
I don't have to trek all the way down. So I think it's important to start off with a good evening. So good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So, as an introductory to our presentation today, can you hear me as I wander around? Wait. I think it's important first that I share, kudos that I really express appreciation of both the administrative team here, the board of directors, and the community members of the Erie Public Schools. I know that throughout this process, you have not only been engaged in really digging deeper and asking and trying to answer some really hard questions, but you've been intentional with making this an inclusive process. You've understood that you can't move forward in making major decisions without being transparent, being articulate, and being inclusive of those that agree, disagree, or may need to be informed as part of the process. I also have to take a moment and thank Mr. Zogby for his role in serving as liaison between our team and the team here at Erie Public Schools. I know that the conversations we're going to embark on are extremely difficult. I've interacted with Erie Public Schools for many years, and not just as secretary. When I was superintendent, of the school district of Lancaster, many of us urban superintendents regularly commiserated together around some of the difficulties in serving, some of our neediest and most deserving children and community members across the Commonwealth. And we continued that relationship, those formal and informal discussions through my tenure and through the role as a member of the team at the Department of Education. So everything that I shared to you is not just contextual from the state perspective, but it's also understanding how difficult a process this is as an educator, as a policymaker, as a parent, and a stakeholder in public education. So as we look through the state, I'm going to share context, and Mr. Zogby is going to get more specific into the plan and share recommendations with greater specificity for everyone to better understand. But I do think it's important, as part of the plan, for me to state a really important fact for us here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that is PA is a local control state. So even in cases where the state has a specific role to play, like this case, we have to understand that our work at PDE is mainly concerned with setting conditions and providing support. Never fails. Here we go. There you go. So, we know that it's ultimately the community and the stakeholders are going to ensure accountability for the implementation and evaluation of the goals that will be outlined this evening. And it's Erie's educators, families, students, and other vested parties who are best positioned to provide ongoing feedback from all relevant perspectives to guarantee that financial stability and academic quality reinforce one another at every stage of the work ahead. So I'll begin this evening's presentation with a little context around Act 55 of 2017, the statute that set this work in motion, and then transition to Mr. Zogby, who will review this plan itself. So first, by way of background, the School District Financial Recovery Act provides a framework for the Department of Education to identify school districts in financial watch status. Erie City School District was designated as a financial watch school district in September of 2016, following its receipt of $2 million in educational access program funding. In addition to PDE providing the district with technical assistance, the law also requires the district to develop a plan to improve its financial status, triggered an enhanced, more intensive collaboration between Erie and the department. That collaboration was further formalized by Act 55, a school code amendment adopted by the General Assembly and signed by the governor that required the appointment of a financial administrator and the development of a financial improvement plan. This consultation will be ongoing, each year after the initial submission of the plan until the secretary and our team determines otherwise. A school district subject to this subsection shall submit a report to the secretary outlining the status of the school's district plan. Now, just for context, I'm not referring to myself in the third party. I'm just kind of, sharing the verbiage of the plan. Meet with the secretary or a designee of the secretary to review the report and the status of the school district's finances and hold an annual public hearing regarding the plan. These provisions are directly tied to the district's receipt of $14 million in additional state aid from the 2018-19 fiscal year. That assistance is now built into the district's basic education subsidy. So just for context of community members that are here, we identified a $14 million of support in additional state aid. In subsequent years, we rolled that funding into the basic education funding line item to ensure the district receives that funding in perpetuity. More specifically, the development of the financial improvement plan requires consultation between the financial administrator, Mr. Zogby, and my office around performance goals, financial, operational, and academic, tied to key benchmarks and timelines, cash flow analysis, rigorous projections of revenues and expenditures for the current fiscal year and 5 years into the future, professional development, over and above the baseline requirements for every school director in the Commonwealth for the members of the Erie City School District School Board, and facilities improvement and ongoing maintenance. These considerations and others are reflected in the improvement plan that Mr. Zogby will present this evening, which I approved on May 14th. However, if I can underscore anything tonight, it's that this improvement plan should serve as a vehicle for creating a culture of continuous improvement across the entire district. It should facilitate communication between the district and leadership staff. It should provide a forum for community dialogue about the state of the city's public schools and serve as a system for evaluating the district's progress and needs in areas including, but not limited to, staffing levels, district assets, and possible consolidations of building or services. So before I turn the rest of the presentation over to Mr. Zogby, I'd like to share 3 key takeaways. First, again, let me emphasize the need for ongoing community voice and engagement in the improvement plan implementation and evaluation. This is not the state capitol, Harrisburg, PDE, the General Assembly, the governor swooping in and instituting mandating change. This is a collaborative process along with the resources that have been provided to provide better educational opportunities for the students of Erie Public Schools within a manner that they can afford and continue to invest in. And perspective is everything. Are you ensuring that diverse stakeholders see the efforts as credible, responsible, and sustainable? Now, secondly, there's a need for fidelity in data and reporting, especially important given investments built into Erie's base. Legislators of both parties from both chambers have come together to secure investments that moving forward will directly reflect student need and school characteristics. Precision and local data quality efforts are paramount, and these can have spillover benefits for other parts of the improvement plan. And finally, whatever else happens, this is an improvement plan, not an academic austerity plan. The district's future is directly linked to the quality, diversity, and equity of academic and other offerings. Attracting the best prepared professionals to Erie and the growing community's already notable pride in Erie City Public Schools requires setting conditions and preserving opportunities for kids. What I learned in my experience as a superintendent is that a rich curriculum, evidence-based professional development, and high expectations
are a complement to financial stability and not in conflict with financial stability. So this will be my lens moving forward for monitoring the district's progress and Mr. Zogby's efforts going forward. And I respectfully encourage you to consider these factors as you hold both PDE and the district accountable for the work ahead. So with that, I thank you all for your time and allowing me to set off this presentation to start us off, and I will now defer to Mr. Zogby to share more specifics about the plan. Absolutely.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that introduction. And I would want to say before I begin, we embarked on this process about a year ago, and at several junctures, the Secretary, his team, Dr. Volkman, Lori Graham, were incredibly helpful in getting us over a number of humps, dealing with some issues, I think, as the superintendent, the board president both well know, and they've been incredibly responsive throughout. And have really made this process a much better process with their help and assistance. So this is the first chance I've had the opportunity to recognize the Secretary and the Department's efforts publicly, and I just wanted to take a moment to do that. In terms of putting together the financial improvement plan, the statute clearly provides the guidance. But as I said about the task of cobbling together this plan, these are really kind of were the criteria, the screens, if you will, that I utilized in coming to the solution that I'm presenting you this evening. One is that the solution lies here in Erie with Erie Public Schools. So we're not looking to the state government for another extraordinary bailout. We're not hoping for some revenues from some nonprofit entity or the federal government. The solution really lies here with Erie Public Schools in the city of Erie. At a high level, people are very, I think, oftentimes overwhelmed with budgets, particularly a budget, in this case, a $200 million budget for the district. But at base, it's really very simple. It's just like balancing your budget at home. You either come up with additional revenues or you cut the spending that you're doing in order to make the ends meet. And that's really the challenge here. As the Secretary outlined, we had to have a 5-year plan that left the district in balance, and that was the challenge. We're looking at revenue and expenditure options or some combination of both. And that those options have to be able to be accomplished with a reasonable degree of certainty. We can't hope for some outside entity. We can't wait for some pending action. They're things that the district itself is within its sphere of control, can execute, and again, can do it with a reasonable degree of certainty, and that moreover, the savings generated by those options are not speculative, that there's a fair degree of certainty as to the savings that can be achieved. We're going to go through each of these in detail, but these are really the steps that I followed, that we all followed in the process here, developing baseline projections, factoring in salary increases, looking at the tax increases needed to balance. We'll go through each of the revenue and expenditure options that I considered. We'll also go through the education facilities improvement plan, because as the Secretary well noted, this is not meant to be an educational austerity plan, and certainly given the trajectory that the district had been on in many years with cuts, deferred maintenance, these are both critical areas of need. And then with all of those, we went about a sorting process. What basket, what bucket of options, what mix of options is most likely to improve the long-term fiscal sustainability of the district? So first, in developing baseline projections, Ian Tyson, who you'll hear from a little later on, our good friend at PFM, Public Financial Management, a resource, an incredible resource, by the way, provided through the Department of Education, built a Erie City School District specific model with the budget, looking at revenues, looking at expenditures, projecting forward for 5 years based on both the district's own experience as well as other metrics that were informing the process. And you can see here from the projections that what we would term in sort of Harrisburg budget lingo, cost to carry, right? What does it cost the school district to simply maintain the program as is? No changes in personnel, no changes in program. And we won't dwell on this too long, but you could see it's a fairly good news story. There's modest budget surpluses every year and a growing fund balance. I think if the board, the superintendent, any of us could take this scenario and sign up for it today, we would. But it's really not a realistic scenario, because it also means that there's no investments in your facilities, no investments in your educational program, and everyone in the district would go for the next 5 years without a salary increase. The first two of those things are steps that we don't think are very prudent. The last is very unlikely to happen. So after that, we then began to factor in salary increases. Now, the reality is that as we're meeting here tonight, the district with its respective negotiating partners is in negotiations with its teachers and other personnel over coming salary increases. That's a big unknown. We don't know what those are going to be. But just doing some reasonable projections, we looked at 1% and 2% salary increase, and it's very clear that a 2% salary increase is what I call sort of a tipping point for the district financially. And you can see the picture here change, that those yearly surpluses begin to erode away. Final 2 years of the projection period, we're actually in deficit. And if anyone's thinking, well, we could just wait till year 5 and sort of deal with it then, just as an order of magnitude, that $3.8 million deficit in year 5 would require something on the order of an 8.3% tax increase, nearly treble, nearly double, more than double your the district's Act 1 index, which is 3.5%. The law allows a maximum of 3.5% tax increase every year. So trying to wait until that 5th year to close that gap would make it impossible. And so we have to look at an approach which I'm advocating in the plan of essentially stable yearly tax increases throughout the projection period in order to bring the district into balance. We then looked at, okay, let's assume a 2% salary increase for everyone. What would it mean in terms of a tax increase to be able to balance the budget through the period? And with the help of our friends at PFM, they were able to calculate that the district would have to raise taxes 1.56% every year for the next 5 years to maintain a balanced budget and to close the gaps. But importantly, that yearly tax increase, it just pays for salaries, so that doesn't allow any new monies for investments in the educational program, and it doesn't allow any new investments for facility improvements. Oops, we skipped over one. Did we? So knowing that tax increases are never anybody's favorite topic to look at, we then began to look at, well, what revenue savings options, what expenditure options could we bring to the table to mitigate or offset the need for tax increases? The first item that we looked at is tax-exempt properties. I would say before I got here, the district, the board, the superintendent, the solicitor had a very aggressive effort ongoing in examining the tax-exempt status of every property in the school district. I was able to find a number of properties. Last summer, the Hands properties got a lot of attention locally, where the district was able to put together what's known as payment in lieu of taxes, agreements by the entities where they would make revenue contributions to the district. In some cases, these properties did not warrant tax-exempt status, and so the district was able to execute what are known as convertible pilots, where the properties pay at a certain rate, but then after a period of time, they go back on the tax rolls at fully taxable status. In the context of looking at the Hands properties, the district was able to determine that there were about 20 other properties out there that were currently designated as tax exempt, but unlikely to qualify for that status under the relevant legal tests. And in those cases, the district has been able to establish convertible pilots. And so this was an easy one for all of us. You can see here by this slide about $750,000 over the next 5 years, additional revenues that will be coming into the district through these agreements. And I would say, too, the district has been recognized nationally. The Lincoln Land Institute ranks Erie among the top 10 communities in the nation that's been able to establish pilot agreements with tax-exempt entities. So this is kudos to the district for really the great work that they've done around this. We then looked at the outsourcing of custodial functions and operations. Really outside of the district's instructional and support staff, the 63 employees who clean and maintain the buildings is the largest group of non-instructional staff. And moreover, looking at the wage comparisons, the district's rates are about 60 to nearly 70% higher than comparable jobs in the private sector. And I know there's been a lot of attention paid to this particular item. What the plan directs the district to do is, beginning this summer, to actually go out and solicit bids. Our friends at PFM have estimated the potential savings this initiative could provide, but what we really don't have are hard bids on the table to actually measure precisely what the savings potential might be. So we want the district to go through that process, solicit the bids, be able to make an informed judgment as to whether outsourcing is a step to take. Make no mistake about it, this is built into the plan as generating substantial savings. So if we're unable to achieve this, or the board, I would say, ultimately rejects this measure, the hole has to be filled in another way. But again, this is probably the most significant, next to the charter school stabilization, which we'll talk about in a bit, probably the single biggest savings initiative that we were able to bring to the table. And we'll go through this process. It'll unfold in the next year, and we'll see precisely what savings can be achieved, and ultimately the board will determine whether to enact those savings or take another route. Next, we looked at what I term stationary steam engineers. The city has an ordinance that requires licensed engineers to operate steam boilers in any building that has one. The district has 6 buildings with steam boilers, but many years ago the board passed a resolution to require licensed engineers in all school buildings. The district's paying about $160,000 a year salary and benefits for overtime, just for the overtime in the buildings that do not have steam boilers. You talk to any professional engineer and they will tell you that a licensed engineer in a building that doesn't have a steam boiler is unnecessary. So we think changing the district's resolution, bringing the district policy in line with the city ordinance, has the immediate effect of the overtime savings. But the truth of the matter is that these building engineers, the vast majority of their functions are custodial supervision in nature. And so what we want to do is, when we look at the custodial outsourcing, wrap in the oversight functions that these engineers provide. And again, we're going to go through this process to see exactly what sort of savings can actually be generated. But you can see here what we're projecting with the PFM model. Next, we move to health care payments for retirees. The school district pays for those employees hired prior to July 1st, 2016, that then retire. Erie Public Schools is the only school district that pays all retiree health costs up to age 65. Healthcare is one of the fastest growing cost centers for the district. This is something where even a small step in terms of cost sharing, as you can see, can have very dramatic savings. This is also something, though, that's subject to negotiations. The district cannot institute this on its own. It needs a partner to do that. And so this is, I know, subject to current negotiations, but the speculative nature of it, of this provision, this option rather, did not allow us to include it in the plan. Likewise, with employee medical benefits, you can see here that Through the projections, we're looking at nearly $8 million growth in employee medical benefits, the single fastest growing cost center for the district, something that clearly needs to be looked at. We just modeled here the deductible savings, which would be Erie currently does not have a deductible for employees. We're talking here in this scenario, raising the deductible to $100 per year for in-network, $200 a year for out-of-network, and for drug copays, a $2 increase for generics from 8 to 10, and a $20 increase for brand-named drugs. And you can see they're both fairly modest steps. And if you're in the private sector, these are probably costs that folks would not be unfamiliar with. You could see the magnitude of the savings, over $1.2 million for the deductibles, nearly $1.5 million for the increased copays. We also took a look at school closures and consolidations. Even with the very difficult work that the district has done in the past in attempts to right-size, both in 2012 and 2017, there remains still about 1,700 plus available seats throughout the system. We know from Erie's past efforts that closing buildings saves money, saves substantial money. And Erie has done that and pulled it off quite well. But we also know that there's a risk with this. I think nobody really knows for sure, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there to suggest that the past efforts have really had an incentive of driving parents out of the school district, making choices of either non-public schools or more likely charter schools. And this is precisely the time, as we'll see in just a second, where the district priority and focus needs to be on holding the kids that are in the system. As I've said time and again here publicly, the single biggest lever that the district has to impact its budget is to curb the future growth of charter school enrollments. So that was one, while we would not put it as a plan A, could eventually be a plan B for the district if it's not able to stem the tide of students outflowing to charter schools. And again, charter school enrollment stabilization, you can see here a nearly $9 million increase in charter school tuition payments that we're projecting over the next 5 years, the second fastest growing cost center in the district's budget. Historically, about 60 students a year have left the district schools for charter schools. What we're talking about with this stabilization initiative is focusing on cutting that enrollment growth in half. So we're not talking about the district needing to pull kids out of existing charter schools, but really, again, just cutting that outflow in half, going from about 30 students a year leaving to about from 60. And of course, an even better news story would be if we were able to stop that tide completely. The district's efforts, as the plan suggests, focusing on school quality. There's evidence to suggest that academics are very much at the top of parents' lists in terms of why they make choices for charter schools. There needs to be also a strategy, a renewed focus on what the district can do, again, to keep students and families in the school district. And there's a lot of efforts at the state level to look at legislation to control charter school costs. And I know the superintendent's very involved in that, but that's something as well that the district, a step that the district can take. And certainly with this school district, the advocacy that they did in securing the $14 million, this team knows how to walk the halls of the General Assembly and make its case, and that's certainly something that would benefit the district. We've looked at things that could save money, but again, as the Secretary said, this is not meant to be an educational austerity plan. And certainly in looking at the challenges that are before the district, and I know this is at the top of the superintendent's list, that improving the academic quality, the educational quality of the programming here in the district is job and priority one. The district started, even as it was coming out of the throes of its financial crisis, started a very robust strategic planning process. That process has put a central focus on accelerating learning growth and success for every student without exception. That's something that I know is certainly shared by the board, by the leadership team in the district. There's already been a number of efforts that have been undertaken to boost student success. There's the recently created Afrocentric academic program with Eagle's Nest that's going to be underway next year. That's a very exciting initiative. There's a number of new career pathway programs in health sciences, early childhood education, maritime aviation studies. And these are programs where not only students are getting skills, but they're walking from across the stage from graduation into gainful employment. So these are incredibly important programs. They're very successful, and they're the types of programs that are going to help maintain and keep students in the district, as well as the Accelerated Learning Program and the K-12 Cyber Program. The district took a great step last year in adding K-5 to its cyber program, and I think, again, that's going to be another tool in the kit in order to reach families and to hold on to them. But it's clear that even as the district has done a lot within its own resources, it's clear that new resources are necessary. You have teachers with incredible jobs in the classroom trying to reach students that are along the continuum, and they're dealing with books that have copyrights back to the early 90s that are probably not aligned to standards. And we think about state tests where students aren't perhaps showing their abilities on a state assessment. The fact that maybe the tools that they're working with are decidedly outdated is probably a factor in that. The district has put forward, I think, a modestly, I'll say, ambitious educational program. One is to update and replace curriculum across all grade levels and subject areas over the next 5 years. They placed a priority on English language arts and math. The board meetings in the last couple of months have focused on those two areas. The district's also proposing to hire 13 new elementary and middle school what are termed interventionists. So these are going to be teachers in the building who are going to be working closely with students and supporting those students who are at risk of failure, with the whole focus of ensuring they get the supports that they need and hopefully are able to reach grade level standards. And then the district has also put forward a facilities plan. The average building age in this district is 75 years. The financial crisis that the district went through has meant a lot of deferred maintenance. And we're not talking about, very sexy things here. It's HVAC, it's electrical, it's plumbing, but it's the roofing. But it's the guts of these buildings, central core systems that keep them open and operating and safe for the students and the teachers that inhabit them every day. The district's proposed a 3-year, nearly $81 million program. Again, it's a very no-frills program focused on the operational integrity of these core systems, and it also includes safety upgrades for nearly every building, or for every building, not nearly every building. So that means swipe cards so that you can regulate who goes in and out, vestibules so that we make sure that adults or visitors are screened before they actually get into the school. Very important steps, not only to maintain the safety of the schools, but hopefully to prevent any tragedy that could occur absent them. I would say, too, that the district has advanced these proposals, not the financial administrator, and I have in my plan adopted these as proposed by the district. So next we turn to, well, with all of that on the table, right, what are the best set of options here that's most likely to improve the district's long-term financial performance? We saw scenario one a few slides ago. Just pay for a 2% salary increase with a tax increase, do nothing more. And you could see that yields a yearly tax increase of 1.56%. We next asked the question, well, what if our goal was to simply hold down tax increases, trying to get tax increases as low as possible? And you could see here paying for a 2% salary increase with a number of the savings measures that we've advanced. This would not include any money for new investments in the educational program, would not include any money for facilities improvements. And you could see there through the savings measures, we're able to drive a yearly tax increase down to less than 1%. We then looked at an additional scenario, scenario 3. Okay, what if we did the salary increase and the facilities and improvement plans, but we took all the hard stuff, all the pain away, right, that nobody really likes? That yields a 4% tax increase, and by that measure, it's over your Act 1 index, and it's simply not an option that the district could pursue, and with that, scenario 3 was discarded. We then looked at a scenario 4A. This was, again, the salary increase, the facility education plans, with a subset of the savings initiatives, the other tax exempts, the custodial outsourcing, and the STEAM engineers. That gets us pretty much to the ceiling of the Act 1 index. We're starting to bump our heads up against it, 3.4%. We then asked, well, maybe there's an alternative to that, right? Let's do everything we want to do, but put that custodial savings, that outsourcing aside, and let's just do the charter school stabilization. That requires an over 3% yearly tax increase. And then finally, a scenario 5, which I've termed sort of the all of the above scenario. And this really takes anticipating the salary increase, implements the education plan, the facilities improvement plan, but then takes all of the viable savings options that are available. And you could see by that, it still requires a 2.4%, 6% yearly tax increase, but it was this scenario that was determined to be the best option to both improve the district's performance and ensure its long-term solvency. And it's this scenario that serves as the basis of the financial improvement plan. Part of the mandate of the financial administrator is to look at policy changes. There's really nothing new on this list that hasn't been talked about. Responsible contracting with the district. Currently, the district limits bidders for its capital projects to only those entities that have what is termed a Class A apprenticeship program. It has the effect of, I believe at least, of severely constraining the competition for the district's facilities business. And with a financially distressed district that has ambitious facility goals, improvement goals, the district really can't afford to turn potential bidders away. And we're talking about qualified bidders. And what we've done here is proposed amending the district's policy, bringing it in line, keeping the apprenticeship requirement, but also allowing another door by which contractors can enter. And essentially, we've set up criteria that mirror the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's responsible contracting criteria. Budget development and approval, number 2, 3, and 5, budget development and approval, budget enrollment and reporting, student exit interviews. These are all things that the superintendent by his own practice has done. So every month when this board meets, the superintendent provides the board with a report of the budget to actuals year to date, and also enrollment, both district enrollment and charter school enrollment. These are great tools. Budget development, the superintendent has a process here that he's developed where he presents the budget very early on. There's sort of an iterative discussion through the months. When then a preliminary budget is adopted in May, final budget adopted in June. Again, this is merely by the superintendent's practice. Also, student exit interviews. So the superintendent has started this year the practice of requiring a student exit interview for every student that withdraws from the district. These are all good things, particularly the latter in that charter school enrollment being what it was, the district really doesn't have a handle on why students and parents are making choices for charter schools. So these are all things, good things that the superintendent is doing by practice. What we want to do is embed them in policy. So as the team up here changes over the years, that we still have the constancy of the policy that guides the district's work. Number 4, timely data submission for state and federal revenues. It seems simple, but the best way to ensure that the district gets its money from Harrisburg and from Washington, D.C. is that it accurately and in a timely fashion reports the data that's necessary. This is something, again, that the superintendent has a good handle on, but it's not inculcated in policy, and so that's what we're looking to do with this step. And then finally, contracting policy, working with the solicitor, the superintendent, bringing to bear for the district a standard contracting process that every contract that the district enters into would be followed. And again, taking it from practice and embedding it in policy. Finally, there were other components that were required by the law to be addressed in the financial improvement plan. You see them listed there. I would just make some comments. The district has had a number of buildings up for sale. I was very pleased to see that it was recently able to sell Wayne. That's not only going to put the property back on the tax rolls, it's going to save the district about $80,000 a year in maintenance costs. Greater use of intermediate programs. The superintendent and the IU are looking at these 2 programs now. Whether transitioning them to the IU could potentially save the district, not necessarily resources, but perhaps freeing up administrative time that could be directed elsewhere in the district. And then finally, performance goals for both the superintendent and the assistant superintendent are outlined in the plan. And then last, but certainly not least, is the exit criteria. Again, the law states that the district has to have demonstrated the ability to maintain a structurally balanced budget. That's going to be a determination that's going to be made in consultation with the secretary. Right now, we're looking at a target of December 2021. By that date, all of the savings initiatives that I've gone through, those will have been addressed, either dealt with affirmatively or negatively. And what we're saying here is that if the district is able to continue to maintain a balanced budget by staying within the Act 1 index, it's that at that point it would be eligible to be removed from financial watch status. So you only have to put up with me for hopefully a couple of more years. Finally, all this information, the PowerPoint, the plan, all the appendices to the plan are up now on the district's website if folks are interested in looking through those. And as the secretary talked about, we're not operating in a vacuum here. There's a body of law enacted by the General Assembly that deals with financial recovery for school districts, and that's all available on the PDE website. So with that, I appreciate everyone's attention, and thank you.
Thank you.
Go back to the beginning.
I'm sure we have some questions if we could ask. I'm going to start with my first one, which is probably on all our minds anyways, but we just want to know the answer that a lot of the things are the board shall adopt, you know, whatever it may be. What if we don't? What goes on from there? If we don't agree with it, or if we turn it down, what happens?
So the process for adoption of the financial improvement plan is exactly that, a process. Much like the first iteration that was submitted to us by Mr. Zogby, we went through. I have one of 2 options: to deny or approve the plan as submitted. Denial doesn't necessarily mean it's a flat-out denial, as we saw through our last conversation, denying, sending it back for revision, and then ultimately reapproving. If you were to, in working with Mr. Zogby, to not approve the plan as submitted, I would then require that you continue to work together and submit something that ultimately I will approve. Understand, just so you know, where my thought process, where our, where our loyalties lie, so to speak. We will not approve a plan that balances the budget on the backs of programs for students and academic opportunities.
Right.
We will not approve a plan that doesn't take into account the longitudinal impact of the education plan for students and ensuring that they're college, career, and community ready. So that's our North Star. So if you were to submit a balanced plan that said you weren't going to invest in literacy or math programs, or you were going to allow outdated books to remain in classrooms, that plan will not be approved. So we would deny the plan. You would be expected to go back to the drawing board, to the table, and work to present a plan. Now, let's say you were to work over a long period of time and ultimately come to the department and share there is no way you're going to come. You will have agreement for the ultimate approval of a plan to submit to the secretary. We would then make a recommendation. We would refer you to the court for possible receivership. And what would be instituted in a receivership, the board would then, all of the power of the board, with the exception of increasing taxes, generating tax revenue, would go to the court-appointed receiver. At that point, which is why I would share it's not the department's favorite option, we have no authority. The board has no authority. The authority then lies with the court, with the president judge, who would oversee the receivership and the receiver plan. So, but ultimately, if you were to go through the process and not submit a plan for approval, that is pretty much the most drastic option that is described in law. There are no other options in law: deny, approve, receivership. We've extended ourselves in a bit to say, because we care about this process, we care about your students, and have provided an abundance of support, much more support than is expected or described by law. But at the end of the day, it's just our philosophy of education. And I also say that to say, with caution, you have an administration here that is very knowledgeable around academic practice and accounting, that absolutely understands the decisions that you're being forced to make and how difficult those decisions are. Future administrations may not feel the same way that we feel, and may be very in tune to just the bare minimum of what the law requires. So you can find yourself, should this draw out for a long period of time, someone else in my position will be making a decision, and they may not necessarily align to the values of this administrative team.
Okay. Anybody else have a question? No, it's just for the board. It's not public. Sorry. Mr. Spiegel.
No, I really appreciate what Mr. Zogby's done, and I agree with a lot of what he said, but I personally think that having the watchdog here until December of '21, I think that's a bit excessive. It seems to me that as long as we come up with a plan approved by you, I feel that we don't really need babysat financially when we are beholden to you, the Secretary's office. Anyways, it seems to me, outside of here, that's just a further waste of taxpayer money to me. If we can prove ourselves to be independently successful, my recommendation is to you is cut him by a year or so. Whenever we are financially good to go, I really appreciate what he's done wherever he is now, but I want to get rid of him. You know what I mean?
The position of financial administrator has been voted on by the General Assembly and approved by the governor. So that's not my decision, your decision, not even Mr. Zogby's decision to make. That's written in the law. So he's here until the district has pulled himself out of this financial watch status. Erie Public Schools is specific to this, to this legislation. And, in defense of the General Assembly, who instituted this designation and place the financial administrator at Erie, I mean, they want to protect their $14 million investment, and that's what they would say in response. So even if you were on track, you would still be monitored until the expiration of the law. But I don't have authority to pull, the financial administrator. What I do have the authority to pull is all the extra supports we put in place. But quite frankly, why would you say no to, to having, third-party experts come and support you? But I don't have the authority to change the conditions of this financial status.
Mr. President,
Yes. Mr. Fabrizi.
I would be remiss if I didn't say something here this evening, so I'm gonna ask just a few questions here.
Sure.
You started off by saying, Mr. Secretary, and I appreciate you being here, I appreciate all that the Department of Education has done for us, but you started off saying that this is not the state swooping in and telling us what to do. But yet there, like some of the policy change about the bidding process and the responsible bidders process, that was brought to our attention and brought to a vote on this board, and this board voted against that, yet it still remains in this plan. And the plan, it says, shall adopt. And like the president brought to your attention, that word shall adopt, does that mean that if we don't adopt that's the whole plan is out the window, or just that section? The other problems that I had with this whole situation is, and I can go back to the whole story of when I started here 8 years ago. It's my last term. I'm on my way out, but we started here 8 years ago, and we started addressing a $26 million deficit. Right from jump, the board has been financially responsible, trying to do things to get ourselves out of trouble. We went to different places. We went to our community and asked all of our financial people in the community to come together and give us their advice. Their advice was we were underfunded. That is how it all began, that we came down to Harrisburg and started putting bugs in those ears, okay? So that's how that all came about. And then, as we went on, we hired our own financial expert to help us, who was Mr. Polito at the time. Not only did we hire him as a financial expert, we made him the superintendent, which over all of Pennsylvania, you look at all the superintendents, how many of them have the financial expertise that our superintendent does? So it was a little bit insulting to us to have this oversight put to us by the General Assembly and appointed in the way that it was appointed. And I won't get into the political aspects of how that took place, but I have my own opinions on the Republican legislature and what their goals were. So all I'm asking is, as we move forward, I have been against outsourcing, but I have been against outsourcing since I started. And at one point, they wanted to outsource the substitute teaching assignments. And so they were going to outsource it to Kelly Services. I spoke vehemently against it, saying that I know about the organization and the problems that causes within the organization when you have an outside employer working side by side with the people in the building, where a principal doesn't have the right to tell this person what to do and what not to do, and has to go through a third party, and it just causes a lot of havoc. So in other words, I fought against it, that proposal. I lost, but I did get it to be where it was held for a one-year contract. During that 1 year, many of the things that I had brought up came to fruition, so that by the end of the year, people knew that outsourcing of that particular service was not what they had promised. Now we're being asked now to shall adopt a looking into the bidding of outsourcing our custodial staff. And the thing that I know about salespeople is they're going to tell us how much money we're going to save. But as time goes on, I don't believe that will happen. I mean, and I don't have a crystal ball. I can't prove that it won't happen, but I know what these guys do, what these people do in the schools, and there's a lot of other jobs other than just what would be contracted if you were contracting an individual from a company. They will do these carpets, empty those waste paper baskets, and do that. Anything extra is going to be charged extra. So when they're giving us their bids, their add-on costs are not going to be included. So these are the reasons that I'm against outsourcing, you know, so that I have other reasons, and because I believe in the people that are working with the district, that have dedicated themselves in the district and have made sacrifices over these 8 years. We've asked them plenty of times to take zeros, to do many, many different things to try to get us through this financial crisis. So we get to the point where the 14 million comes through, where we finally thought that we did the right thing. We went and explained to the legislature and the Department of Education what our problems were, what we had done, and they had seen the light and told us, yes, here, you get the but then we had the financial administrators. So now we're paying back those people that made those sacrifices without sourcing the whole deal. Now, you can, and I understand what Mr. Zogsby said, and I like Mr. Zogsby. We talk, he's a personable individual. But I understand where he's coming from and where he came from. And that is a little hard to talk about without being political. And I understand that you, as Secretary of Education, don't want to be involved in that political conversation because of the position that you're in. But the fact is, the facts are there. And this is what I feel, that this is the state coming in, not the state. The Republican legislature came in, swooped in, and is making demands of this district that I feel are anti-union, anti-union. I'll stop talking now. I understand. I don't want to take up any more time. I've probably said this all before, but I want to make sure that I got it across to you.
Yeah. And so I want to make sure that I engage in the process. So by design, we know that we have the process that is impacting Erie Public Schools. We have other school districts that are in financial watch, that are in, have chief recovery officers in place and receivership. What we've done, and I'm going to say we because we've changed the practice over the course of our administration, and we've had this conversation offline, all of us, a number of times, but I do think it's important to share in aggregate so you understand where I'm coming from and where the team is coming from. First, I think it's not questionable. We have a really talented group of folks working on this, both from the academic lens, from the financial lens, and have brought in very talented external partners to kind of make sure we're calibrating in a meaningful way. What we do by design, we have conversations around remaining neutral. As difficult as this process is, and as, although I'm the guy standing here and we're engaging in this conversation, this process for me is defined for us in the Department of Education, is defined by law. So my team meets to calibrate to make sure that the information that's shared in building the report is accurate. By design, I don't get involved in that process. I try really hard to not track it in media, social media. If anyone tries to speak to me about this issue, before I review the plan, I'm walled off. I wall myself off, because when I read your plan, I want to be able, and not only your plan, the 10 plans I read over the course of the year, I want to be able to make a decision and recommendations around the plan without being influenced, through the journey there, right? So when you hear the shalls, right, the shall in this law is the board shall adopt a plan. I'm not saying the plan has to be inclusive of what the recommendations were, but I do, everything that I shared earlier. Provide academic opportunities for students, ensure that there's a continuity, in having a balanced budget, provide for the growth of academic and student programs moving forward. That's what I look at. If, in making the recommendations, as Mr. Zogsby did, and when it reported to us, it showed that there is an opportunity to continue to invest in the district, the infrastructure of the district, invest in student programs, build more student programs, and have a balanced budget at the end. That's what I'm required to do by law. I can't provide, insight or it's not a menu for me. It's submitting a law, submitting a plan that meets the expectations of the law. Now, you will meet with Mr. Zogby because I approved the plan for him to come back to you. Now, if the board chooses, and this happens, I mean, trust me, board will meet with the financial administrator, and if the board chooses to not approve a plan, we'll be contacted. The board has not the board has not approved the plan, and we say, well, you have to work through the plan to make sure that there's a balanced plan to submit. That is and I understand everything you're sharing, but I'm telling you, my responsibility under law is to approve a plan that shows the school district has strong financial accounting, has a plan to move forward for 5 years and have a balanced budget. Not, all the other aspects under that plan is really in consultation with the school board of directors, the administration, and the financial administrator.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is when it says shall adopt numerous times within this plan, that each of those specific shall adopts do not have to be adhered to they go against the plan, that doesn't completely...
You, as a board, you have an opportunity now that a plan has been introduced to the board. You have
But the plan
you have the
says that
responsibility
on this
to...
date, we shall adopt this, on this month, we shall adopt that. If we
No,
don't-
yes, so we are now, as prescribed by law, Mr. Zogby and I have presented this plan to the board. The board now has the legal obligation to approve or not approve the plan. And next course of action is triggered by whatever the decision of the board is. I'm not telling you to approve it or not approve it. What I'm telling you is what I'm required to do by law. And that's what I'm here doing today, is fulfilling my obligation under law. If you approve this plan, then we move forward with the plan.
So this plan will be presented to us for approval at this point?
This plan is being presented to the board for its consideration as required by law. And if you deny it, we're going to go back to Mr. Zogby as required by law, and we'll have to go through this process with whatever the new plan is again. And if you deny the other plan, we'll do it again. But at some point, understand, I am obligated to fulfill my obligation under law. So me standing here is just saying that the plan has been submitted and meets the requirements under law. It's not, validating or, invalidating any specific aspects of the plan. It meets the legal requirements under law, and that's what we approved as submitted.
So when do we know if the hammer's going to come down as far as receivership? I talk straight out.
I can't answer that question now. I don't know if you approved or not approved the plan.
Mr. President.
Ms. McNair, go ahead.
I'll turn this thing, oh, it's already on. Oh, there we go. So just from piggybacking off of what Robbie said, so from what I'm understanding that you're saying is that we have the opportunity to either approve or deny this plan, and make adjustments as we see fit, like as if he was stating, because one of my issues would be the outsourcing. And Robbie was right when it came to the outsourcing of the secretaries, and that would be a concern of mine, to outsource our maintenance positions, because like he said, I do feel like they play an important role, and I would never want to be supporting anything that was anti-union, or even the fact that these people have been working here for all these years and then turn around and place them into outsourcing. They're a part of the district. They're a part of the district just like I feel like the teachers are a part of the district. They've been working here for years, and that's something that I would want to address. But my question also would be is if we made an adjustment to one part of it or another part of it, and then we resubmit it, how does that affect us financially? Does anything change, or how much opportunity do we have to readjust anything? Is there a time frame? Would be some of my questions, because I get the feeling that we are going to address some of the issues that we have as a board with the plan, and just, wondering how is that going to affect us as far as financially and time frames of when we have to have the final plan submitted.
I heard everything you shared. I'm looking through the actual law so I can cite what the law.
Okay, 'cause I was wondering.
Maybe I can clear, Mr. Rivera, too, also. See, we were under the assumption, once you approve the plan, we're stuck with it.
Yeah, so.
And that we weren't going to approve it.
So what we shared, and I apologize, because I'm looking at the law with greater specificity. So just reading what Act 55 shares. Report of the final financial improvement plan. When the finance plan is approved by the secretary, the financial administrator, and the secretary shall present the plan to the school board of directors at a public meeting, and transmit copies of the plan to the governor and the chair, the minority chair appropriations in the committee of the Senate, the chair and minority chair of the education committees of the Senate, the chair and minority chair of the appropriations committee of the House of Representatives, and the chair and the minority chair of the education committee of the House of Representatives. The school district shall post the final financial improvement plan and any subsequent revisions of the school district's publicly accessible website, and then implement the plan. So the Board of School Directors shall reopen the school district's budget and revise the budget and other policies to reflect the financial improvement plan. Future budgets and policies shall adhere to the financial improvement plan as determined by the administrators. At any time, so as you're reviewing this plan and you're making those recommendations, and this is what I could have been clearer about. So as part of the law, at any time, the financial administrator may make revisions to the plan as necessary with the approval of the secretary. So what Mr. Zogby and I have discussed, if there's other options, as he shared, that will balance that budget, this is a living document as we described it. Those recommendations can be made. Now, ultimately, if non-compliance with the financial improvement plan, if the financial administrator and secretary determine that the Board of School Directors has not complied with the provisions of the plan, the financial administrator shall assume authority of the Board of School Directors, except for the authority to levy taxes under Section 507, and implement the provisions of the financial improvement plan in consultation with the secretary. So what you do is not actually the approval of the plan. I apologize. It's approval of the budget as it falls under the plan. And as you have those conversations with approval of the budget under the financial plan, that's when the financial administrator, in consultation with the board, and then ultimately with me, can make revisions to that living document.
Anybody else? Ms. Feeney?
Yes, thank you. First of all, we do want to thank the state. We greatly appreciate the $14 million infusion into our budget. It has helped tremendously, and as you've seen, we have used that money very, very wisely, and we will continue to. I also want to mention that I am in favor of the governor's proposal to raise the minimum average salary of Pennsylvania teachers to $45,500. Although our teachers right now our starting teachers are working below that. So being that we are in a financial pinch, I'm also hoping that the state will recognize that and offer us some additional support in order to see that proposal through. I also want to speak to our legislators, and I want you to understand that Erie Public Schools educate students in the poorest zip code in the state. And our students have many diverse needs, and our costs are consequently greater than that of wealthy districts. And so we need to look at that basic funding formula again and again. We appreciate everything the state has done to improve that formula, but we've been living under this dark cloud for a long time, and our students have not been getting the fair funding. So if we just go back and look at, and I'm taking some of this information from our EEA president, Mr. Bill Kuhar, and I thank you for that information, but if pupil spending were to remain at 13,829 according to the PEA Ready Index, which is well below the state average of 15,291. When applied to our 11,000 student body members, that equates to roughly $6 million less in funding than what our students rightly deserve. When I came onto this board, part of the reason I came onto the board is because I wanted to advocate for our students. And I appreciate Mr. Zogby saying that we know how to do that here at the Erie School District, and I want to continue to do that. So don't be surprised if you see my face a little bit more often down in Harrisburg lobbying for our students, because I was told when I came onto the board, we were told don't ask for any more money. Well, the reality is, if we really want to do what's best for our students, we have to find ways to get that revenue. And I feel we've done an outstanding job with our pilot agreements, with what the Erie community is trying to do to build our downtown development core. We are doing a great deal to promote Erie and to help our students be the best that they can be. But again, I feel like we're still behind. We're behind the other school districts. Finally, to our legislators, we need, at a minimum, cyber charter school law reform. And that law reform needs to level the playing field, and it needs to include the funding and the equal accountability, because we are not held equal at this point in time. If at the minimum our legislature were to pass cyber charter school law that said that parents who choose to educate their child at a cyber charter school outside of a district that has a cyber program, that they should have to pay tuition. And so I know that that's not making much headway downstate right now, but now that I have this platform, and thank you for being here to give me that platform, I just wanted to speak to those points.
Okay. Mr. Harkins.
I want to express my singular personal opinion at this moment because we're here under this law. I've been involved with the school district of the City of Erie for the better part of 45 years. That doesn't make me smarter or more right, but it gives me reference points, and it makes my opinion at least an informed one. About 25 years ago, a philosophy seemed to change in Harrisburg that it was okay to neglect state funding of public schools in a general way. Up to then, I think it was viewed by both political parties as kind of a sacred thing that was left alone and protected and preserved. In the interest of time, I won't elaborate on that, but around that time, the charter schools began to surface and evolve, and it's evolved now to where it costs us $12 million a year that we have to pay instead of to our students and for their needs and for our community to these charter schools, these for-profit charter schools. Everyone knows that, but I'm objecting specifically and in particular right now to this annual training for board members. The plan must include no less than 10 hours in school finance and policy provided by state, et cetera. Those of us that spend time on a school board aren't stingy with our financially uncompensated time and hours. But if this was 10 minutes, it would still be wrong, because it's based on a lie. It's based on the premise that the school district mismanaged or recklessly, foolishly mishandled money over a period of time, and the state had to come in and save us, and therefore they now have to, along with that, be responsible in their eyes and teach us how not to waste money in the future. When in truth, and this is in harmony with what Mrs. Feeney was referring to, the state should have done better, could have done better, must do better for all of its public schools systems. It hurts us more than many because of our zip codes. The property values within them are insufficient for us to tax those property owners and meet the needs of our school system. If we quadrupled everyone's property taxes in the city of Erie, we wouldn't come close to what we need every year. We made a case a few years ago to the state legislature, and I believe we shamed them into giving us $14 million. It should have been more than double that. And I could make a case, and I did at a couple prior board member meetings, where if you look at where we were headed prior to 2010, we are on track and would have received probably about $140 million since then that we did not get. Now, we can't make a legal claim to money we were on track to get, I understand. But when Governor Rendell was in office, he recognized that some school district zip codes were suffering more than others, and he, through the costing out plan, tried to right that, and we were on track to do that, and we were making progress. And when President Obama and Arne Duncan had the programs such as Rise to the Top, we were justifying and receiving a few $1 million and on track to receive that. Until 2010, when the tidal wave hit and the Tea Party came into Washington and threw a monkey wrench into everything there, and Governor Corbett came into power and took $1 billion from all Pennsylvania school districts in one swoop through changing the names of funding, description of funding programs, and changing with a shell game. $1 billion was taken from all Pennsylvania school districts. I'm not quarreling with you, Mr. Secretary. I respect you. You weren't here for all of what I just described. 2 board members that we have were not even part of the board when all of this was evolving and developing. To require us to spend 10 hours, I can't wait to see what I do, because I don't want to bring dishonor to the school district, and I don't want to grandstand, and I don't want to do harm to the school district. But I object to that because it presumes and infers that we caused our own problems. Certainly, any responsible person can learn with hindsight and all the analysis this has been given, and there's a lot of good in this document, and I've learned to respect Mr. Zogby's professionalism and his conduct, and certainly we all can move forward with better informed decisions and more awareness of the realities that we have. But it just sticks in my craw, this required 10 hours annually. If I could make it simple, and if it came down to it, I'd spend 10 hours in jail instead of acknowledging that we caused our own problems. If you believe that, the villain gets left off the hook. The continuing problem of underfunding the schools goes on, and it just bothers me. It upsets me greatly that the people that deprived us of the money gave us a fraction of what we need and then require us to learn how to spend the money better. I'm grateful for Senator Laughlin's efforts. He got us to $14 million. That's $14 million we didn't have. And if it was up to him, I have no doubt it would have been greater than that. But the Pennsylvania General Assembly has not done its job over a span of years, and we're suffering for it. And as I said, we're all learning from the reality that we've just come through, and we're working on it. But it's just absurd to make people like Darlene Feeney and Tyler Titus spend 10 hours annually for a problem they weren't even here for. And as I said, you weren't the Secretary of Education, and I understand the law is what brought us here, but it's hard to swallow. I'll stop there. I could go on, but I think I made my point.
And I do think it's important for me to, set in context. Trust me, as we're having these conversations about Act 55, about the law, about the recommendations around the plan going to be submitted, and ultimately around the decision the school board of directors is going to have to make around its final budget, and what happens after then, whether it's the requirement for school board director training, the requirement for the other financial recommendations. I like coming to Erie. I enjoy visiting schools. I had a great conversation when we came to visit your community schools, meeting with your students in the culinary arts program. This is not, my preferred, method of visiting the school district to stand up here and present the plan. I'm doing what I'm required to do by law.
I understand.
And the General Assembly voted, with a majority, in a bipartisan, bicameral manner to push forward Act 55 to allow for the additional funding. The governor signed this into law. So I don't get to pick and choose as Secretary what parts of the law I want to follow through with, and what parts I don't necessarily feel are fair and equitable. If I did, there'd be a lot of things I would require, wouldn't require of school districts. But I'm fulfilling my legal obligation today in doing this, as Mr. Zogby is fulfilling his legal obligations to make the recommendation. So what I would say, I can absolutely appreciate and fully understand your frustration in the requirements and what you and districts across the Commonwealth that are dealing with many similar situations are forced to do. But I would feel as an agent of the administration, I would just always caution that we shared a lot of information today. A lot of information was shared by Mr. Zogby that was difficult to process and to absorb. We are going to continue to fulfill our obligation before Act 55 that we started together 4+ years ago. And we'll continue, to meet and support the district and the financial administrator with technical assistance to provide programs and services that students deserve and that will improve their outcomes, their academic outcomes to post-secondary opportunities, to career opportunities and the like. What I would say is, this has been presented. Mr. Zogby is going to continue to work with you as you look to present a final budget. As difficulties present themselves or if more information is needed, we're going to continue to work with you through those difficulties and to pull the information together. What I would ask is that I have a job to do and I have to fulfill my obligation under law by the General Assembly. I'm going to continue to insist that you work together to come up with a balanced plan that's in a balanced fiscal plan that's in the best interest of students. And that's kind of where we're going to continue to come to the table and push and insist. I fully appreciate me being here and you using this as an opportunity to share your thoughts and the message to Harrisburg. But I want to make sure that, when we leave here today and we have to get back to the business of supporting schools, that we don't cut our noses off to spite our face and hurt students because this process, may not be viewed as fair and equitable. I have a legal responsibility in being here and fulfilling Act 55, but that doesn't mean that, I and my team and our third-party partners aren't going to continue to work with you to find the best resolution for Erie Public Schools and the students of Erie Public Schools. So that's the commitment you have of me, both on the record and off the record, continuing to have, the right conversations. But remember that this is a law. I don't know if it'll mean 10 hours in jail or mean 10 hours in, although some of the professional development sessions could feel like jail. But, I don't know what that ultimately mean at the end. But I would say let's just try to work to do what's right on behalf of the students.
I have done that, Mr. Secretary, and I plan to continue to. And as I said, my quarrel is not with you, but I just don't want it ever to be forgotten or distracted from the fact that the state legislature has to do a better job, in my singular opinion, has to do a better job of funding public education. It's taken, as you know, until this year, where the court system is now going to begin to deal with fair funding of public schools in Pennsylvania. It took so much and so long just to get the chance to have the courts consider whether or not it's fair or unfair, where your zip code is, whether your kid gets a good education or not. So we're all on the same page. As you said, and I tried to stress, if I didn't, I want to say I'm not here to quarrel. I've participated faithfully. I don't want to be dramatic and bring dishonor to the school district or cause it any problems. But it's just to accept that as it is to accept the premise that we caused our problem and we did not.
Understood.
Thank you.
As you can see, I got a mic here. As you can see, there's very passion up here, and there isn't any person on this board that isn't about the kids. Okay, everything we've done, and I too came on when it was 26 million in the hole. Okay, and we went through a lot of hard decisions, and this board has gone through a lot of hard decisions, and I have said the decisions we're making now are even harder than we made before. Okay, and we'll work through whatever we have to work through. The problem I have, and I hate to do this, but the problem I have is doing it on the taxpayers, okay? Because that's what pushed some of the people out before, and it's going to push more out. When you're talking a 2.46 for the next 5 years, that's tough to swallow for people that are on a budget, you know? And I understand that we got to do something. I just think there's got to be another way. And the other part of it is we could have never got our schools open when we had our fire without our people. If we had a group that we subbed out to, they wouldn't have done what our people did. Everybody in our district stepped up and is that invested in our kids to make sure that we had that school open so they could learn. So that's just some of the stuff. I mean, we all share the same passion here, and we understand. It's like I told you before, I really respect it, and I know it's not you, you're doing your job, okay? And as we are doing, we're trying to do our best for the taxpayers and for the kids. You know, we all are about the best education for our kids could be. That's why we've made the choices. And the hard thing for us as a board is we made all these choices prior to the state coming in. When the state came in, we were at that point already. We were on our way. We had a strategic plan. We had the 5-year plan. We were already there. It's just you imposed the financial guide, not you, but the state imposed the financial advisor to come in. And the only thing you could find left was our custodial staff and some engineers. We cut everything else. There was nothing else to cut. So that one you're probably going to have a battle on. I'm just saying. But I thank you. I appreciate everything that you do for us and the money you've given us already, and we will work through whatever we can. I thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
right.
President,
Yes.
Mr. President, if I could just say one more thing. I just want to ask one more question. I just want to say that you stated in the conversation that if we don't adhere to the plan, if we don't adhere to the things that have been put upon us, I mean, I understand you're saying it's guidance, but I don't look at it with guidance when receivership is hanging over our head. So when you say go back and work with Mr. Zogby, then we may have reason to give and take, but Mr. Zogby wouldn't have, he has all the power. He gets to take over if we don't agree. So in his mind, he would rather have us not agree. I mean, I'm not, whatever, but if we wouldn't agree, then he gets to say so, and he's the dictator of the school district, however you want to put it. But I mean, I'm like I said, I talk straight out, Mr. Secretary, I apologize, but that's exactly the position we're in, is you're going up against somebody that gets to make the decision that if you don't agree with me, then as time, and I tell the Secretary of Education, which we were the impression he was under you, so that we could appeal to you for those situations, but now you're putting it back in his court. So it's really not solving any of our problem here. We don't know whether or not, like, I wasn't sure how this went, like each of these things that says shall adopt, that we have to adopt each of these things. Now you're kind of saying that we may be able to look at certain things like the bidding process. We could look at that one because that savings was not as substantial as what is being projected for the outsourcing. But the outsourcing itself, like I said, I'm not going to believe whatever projections they're going to make. So those conversations are going to take place, but in the end, you're saying you're going to tell us to go back and work with Mr. Zogby to work it out. But what leverage do we have? We have none. He has it all.
So, to be clear in the law, and I didn't represent this as well as I could have earlier, but I want to just, and Act 55 is right online, so I'm reading right from the law. The Secretary has the authority to approve or deny the plan. That's my authority, and as, you know, we provided technical assistance, as you've worked together with Mr. Zogby to provide the support, the data, to drive the plan. What I look at in looking at that plan is that it meets the requirements on the law, that it presents an opportunity to balance the budget with that 5-year projection. And then the school board of directors shall reopen the school district's budget and revise its budget and other policies to reflect the financial improvement plan. That's the authority of the school board of directors. If in following through with that authority, there still continues to be a rub between the plan that I approved and is being proposed is being submitted, and your responsibility to present a budget that aligns to that plan, that's where we have to continue to work to resolution to both have a budget that the school board works with that aligns to the plan. If that doesn't happen, then that's where we continue to work. You know, that's where I've committed to continuing to present that plan. I also want to be really, really honest and clear, because I can say this. So Mr. Zogby was appointed by the General Assembly and the governor, and then he came and worked with us. He has never, ever presented to the school, to the Department of Ed, I want to create a plan that they will ultimately deny so that I can have, oversight of the district. As a matter of fact, I don't think he wants that responsibility of the district. He's, he has wanted to continue to work, and our, feedback with him is the expectation that they do work
He
together.
presents himself very well.
But this is where the school board and the chief financial administrator will work together so that the final budget aligns to the submitted and approved plan. Should that not work, then that's where we have the ability to reopen and look at the plan to make sure that, that it does align. But, I just want to be really clear. Under law, my authority is to approve or deny, and the law is very specific to what happens if we don't have a plan moving forward. I don't have any latitude, under the law. The law is very prescriptive in terms of what my responsibilities are, in terms of what the responsibilities of the financial administrator is, and what the responsibilities, of the school board are. So there's, I don't have gray area. I don't have, the ability of, if anything, I think the supports that we've put in place leading up to today far even extends what we're supposed to be doing under law. We just want this to be as balanced and fair of a process for you, for the district, as it possibly can. So we've, sort of even already overextended, ourselves and have taken some liberties with providing the level of support. And we'll continue to do so as long as we're not called on it because, it's not allowable by law. But, I think as you're making decisions, just take a good look at Act 55. I welcome anyone to do that. And, as much as I will continue to work to support the school district and the community, I can't violate the law.
Yeah.
And it's kind of where I ultimately am.
Again, I thank you very much for all you do for us. Thank you.
Absolutely.
At this time, we have a vote on new business.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Harkins.
we adopt the new business as listed before us.
We have a motion by Mr. Harkins.
Second.
Second by Mr. Spiegel. Is there any discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Mrs. Alexandrovich?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo? Oh, not here. Mr. Fabrizi?
Yes.
Mrs. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mrs. McNair?
Yes.
Mr. Spiegel?
Yes.
Mr. Petrunger?
Yes. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute brief intermission, which we will come back and go over the budget and LRTA, and then we'll have to have executive session after that, but we're going to take 10-minute break, and we'll meet back here in 10. At this time, we're going to move on to the 1920 budget. Mr. Polito.
Well, tonight at your desk, you have a summary of the proposed preliminary budget, which we would like to bring to you for adoption at next week's meeting. And just a reminder, this is not the final budget. This is the preliminary budget, so it will still give us some options to continue to work through that process until June 30th. So the proposal that we have for you tonight is we're bringing you a balanced budget for this year. And in a minute, Ian from PFM is going to go over the projections, but it also, for all intents and purposes, provides a balanced budget for the next 5 years. The plan, again, as we discussed in April, this budget really helps us get the resources we need that are recommended in our financial plan, in our educational plan, our strategic plan, and our facilities plan. So it provides a curriculum replacement cycle, provides additional supports to students not on grade level. Initially, we were recommending some educational interventionists at each of the elementary and middle schools. We are rethinking that process and looking to drive that money out with the fair funding formula, and I will get to that a little later. And also, we'll completely fund Phase 1 of our facilities plan. So with the bond issue that we just closed on this Tuesday, along with the capital projects transferred proposal in this budget, we will have the $30.8 million needed to do Phase 1. And the proposed real estate tax increase in this preliminary budget is 2.46%, which is what is recommended in the financial plan. So just to give you a summary, and again, you have some more detail at your place here. We have our 18-19 estimate, and we do have some good news as we've refined those numbers. It appears as though we are looking to come in at a $4 million surplus for the 18-19 school year. That's up from $3.5 million last month. And our 19-20 budget, again, with the 2.46% tax increase, provides for a balanced budget this year. And at this time, I'd like to ask Ian to come up and just go through the projections. Ian is, he's with PFM. He's been working with us since 2016 and is really the brains behind the financial projections you've been seeing for the last 3 years.
Thanks, Brian. I'm just going to zoom out here for a little bit. Well, it's small on the screen. So what we're looking at here is the 5-year projection of all the elements that Brian talked about in the preliminary budget. So this is all the initiatives that were recommended as part of the financial improvement plan, starting off with the preliminary budget for 2018-19, and then carrying it forward 5 years out to 2024-25. So this is 1 year beyond what's in the financial improvement plan. Financial improvement plan ended here in 2023-24, so this just takes it out to the next step. This will be year 6 of the 5-year plan, with the current budget year being year 1. So I'm not going to go into the details of what's going on for each of the line items, but just as a reminder for what's going on here, so we have the additional revenue from the payment in lieu of taxes program for the pursuit of the for the extra revenue from the tax-exempt properties. Those properties, we show the additional revenue from the pilots, then they return to the tax rolls. We're showing the savings from the outsourcing initiatives for the custodians and the stationary STEAM engineers. And then we're showing the continuation of the curriculum cycle, the curriculum replacement cycle for the 5 years. And then after the 5th year in 2023-24, we continue it for the 4th year, assuming that you're going to start over from the beginning again and begin replacing the curriculum that would now be 5 years out of date. Within this also includes the 2.46% tax increase as recommended by the financial improvement plan, and the charter school stabilization initiative. So after the current budget year, 2019-20, the increase in enrollment is reduced to 30 students per year. And that continues for all 5 years of the projections. Just one thing that I'm going to highlight here before I move on to showing a couple of different options for what this would look like as we sort of peel back the layers of some of these initiatives to see what the impact of all of them will be. In the financial improvement plan, we ended here with a balanced budget, but going out into the next year, as those costs grow, the 2.46% tax increase is not enough to cover that increase in the annual cost. So this isn't, to me, this isn't a red flag at this point. This just reminds me of the hard work that it takes to balance a school district budget. It's something that requires constant vigilance, even with the increase in state aid over year, even with changes in the tax base, you still need to keep a close eye on what are your costs, how are they growing, how did the decision that you make here today impact you over the 5 years? Because again, as we change things today in the 2019 budget or change where we show things in the projections, these numbers will change. And again, this is not a prediction of where you'll be in the 5 years. This is just a projection. Is if we take the information that we have today, here's what that impact would be. So I'm just going to start by taking off the charter school assumptions. So this just assumes that the increase returns to the 60 students per year. What that does to the financial balance over the 5 years. And here what happened is, and again, I probably should have covered this in the beginning. So for those in the back who can't see, so the dark purple line, the dark purple bars would be the district's fund balance. So that's that would be the money in reserve in the general fund, and the yellow bars above the line would be a surplus, with the red numbers below indicating the deficit. So here, the deficit got shifted left 1 year. So instead of showing a deficit in 24-25, it shifts out to the left to 2023-24. This highlights the importance of watching that charter school enrollment number, because the variability there, that can really drive the growth in your costs over time. So as those students add up, so instead of showing 150 students over the 5 years, now we're up to 300. So again, that can have a really big impact on your budget. So as you come to the planning process every year, as you monitor your enrollment throughout the year, we'll come back and we'll revise these assumptions over time. But right now, just given what we know and given what we see with the enrollment trends, I don't feel quite comfortable just saying that this is going to be flat for 5 years. Now, if you take off the tax increase, now those yellow bars get a lot more intimidating. So that means that from the starting point of today with the 1920 budget, there's no tax increase for the next 6 years. So this is from 1920 going out to 2024-25. So again, this means that that the investments that you would be making in the budget today, with the additional debt for the facilities plan, transferring that money to the capital fund, and making those investments in the staffing and the curriculum, those wouldn't be sustainable unless you address either the revenue side of the equation or the expense side of the equation. Brian, I think I could stop here and answer any questions that the board might have.
Ian, can you turn everything back on so we can see with the 1.4? So this, again, gives us the balanced budget, and the requirement under the financial plan is to remain balanced through 2023-24. Again, as Ian said, we still need to keep an eye on 24-25, but this is really the reason why we're making this proposal tonight, is because, again, this provides us the resources we need to begin implementation, the initiatives we've started in the strategic plan, as well as provide resources for our facilities plan, and at the same time provides a balanced budget as required in the financial plan.
Anybody have any questions right now?
Can you show us what this would look like if we just increased taxes to 2%? Is that possible?
I could show that, and I could share that with Brian so that he could show it to you.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have that built
Yeah,
into it
I
right
know
now, but
that,
I could certainly do that for you.
I think we've looked at it before.
Yeah. And again, like as you guys come up with different ideas for what you would plan to do over those 5 years, we can run any number of scenarios for you. So if you make any different decisions on
with how we incrementally might do it, or, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That would drive out roughly $1.2 million deficit in 23-24, which would take the 24-25 closer to 3.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea. We will get you the exact, but that's my fast math.
No other questions?
I am.
Oh, go ahead.
Are you located in Philadelphia?
Yeah, that's where my office is.
So we certainly appreciate all the work that you do. I mean, that's a lot of number crunching there that a lot of people don't spend time, and they have no appreciation of how difficult it is to do that. So I certainly appreciate that, and thank you for coming up and spending some time. I know I just drove in from Philadelphia like 2 days ago. It's a long drive, so we appreciate it.
And Brian can attest that there were very few stones that were left unturned in this budget, so I asked him a lot of questions.
Yes. again, Ian has been working with us for 3 years, and he's really, again, the brains behind these projections, and we appreciate his support now and over the last couple of years. Is there any other questions on the projections?
I don't think so.
Okay, thanks, Ian. So as far as the tax increases, and I know that we have gone over these slides before, but I think it's important again to just to share publicly what the impact of the proposed tax increase would look like, and also what our tax rate is compared to the surrounding school districts. So you can see where we are right now with the millage rate compared to the municipalities surrounding us. We're slipping into pretty average territory for our tax rate overall. When I started here, our tax rate was second highest in that group, just behind Iroquois. But over the last several years, our neighbors have been raising their taxes between 2% and 3% a year, and we've had zeros and 0.5%. So over that time, again, we've kind of slipped into average territory. And then when you look at the actual costs on a $100,000 home, and this is after the homestead exemption, you can see that our tax burden, the school tax burden, which is the red part of that bar, is actually very competitive. We're actually below all but 2 school districts in that same group. So when you look at that, you know, somebody that owns a $100,000 home in Erie and somebody that owns a $100,000 home in Mill Creek, the school taxes on that home are actually less in the city of Erie than they are in Mill Creek. And the green bar on that chart really shows the impact of the city or municipality taxes. And when you look at that, you can see that really that's the main reason why taxes in the city of Erie are higher than the surrounding municipalities. So we put this scenario up before, but I updated it to include the 2.46% increase. That equates into a 0.41 mil increase, which to the owner of a $100,000 home would cost $41.30 a year, a little over $3 a month. And the revenue that is generated from that increase is $1.1 million. And then, again, I think it's, you know, moving forward, the last couple of years I've been advocating that the district start to get on a more of a maintenance real estate tax increase in line with the cost of living. And so I extended this spreadsheet out to include 2019, and this compares our tax increases all the way back from 2007 to the consumer price index as well as the Social Security cost of living increase each year. And as you can see, if we do go to the 2.46% increase this year, on average over that time period, we are still under both those indices as far as the percentage increase. For this year, you can see that the consumer price index did dip a little bit, but the 2.46 is actually under the Social Security cost of living increase that people on Social Security received in January of 2019. Is there any questions on that? So my question tonight to the board, we'd like to take this budget and move it forward for approval next week. And I'd like to get a sense before we do that, whether or not there's support to do that with the 2.46% tax increase, because we do have some time constraints here. We have to adopt the preliminary budget 30 days before the final budget, and if we don't have support for this proposal, then I need to rework the budget and bring you back some different options.
So a quick poll. Starting down there with Mr. Fabrizi. Where you at? Huh?
I'm right here.
There's more people down that way. I'll start down here if you want.
Start down there so we can see the top.
Starting down here?
Yeah, starting down here. That
I
end didn't like it.
I agree with raising taxes 2.46%. There's some other things in the plan I'm not sure how I feel about, but I do feel that we need to steadily, or not, we need to maintain a level of taxation, and I felt that way for a long time. I wish, though, last year, we had increased it a little bit more so that we would have maybe only had to have done 2% this year, but yeah. As part of the plan, I agree with.
Okay. John?
That percentage amounts to less than $500,000.
Yes.
On that basis, I can accept it.
You know my answer. Which is no.
Although I'm loath to say yes, but I think the district has been making great improvements, more than anything else, I think, in the curriculum. And I do think that we have, it's our responsibilities to pay the teachers and to pay everybody else. And we can't retain a quality workforce unless we pay them. And everybody's going to be leaving if we don't have the money to pay them. Besides, we have clocks that don't work. We have 1972, TVs up there. The money has to come from somewhere. I'd like to not be embarrassed when the Secretary of Education shows up here with a clock to tell us the correct time. So I'm in favor.
It's just our time, Tom, that's all. It's our time. Linda?
Yeah.
That's simple. Angela?
Well, I'm not going to have much to say, but I do not want to raise taxes, but I also know that we haven't been raising them quite often, and when we did raise them, it was very slim. I feel like we should not procrastinate in what we need to do, so then it wouldn't have such a hard impact when we actually do it. I think that's what the issue is. So if we needed to, I'm looking at, how we're doing this, and it just doesn't seem appropriate to me that we go 0, 0, 0, and then raise it a high number, and then jump back to zeros, and then raise it at an extremely high. So it's a shock to taxpayers, including myself. So I'm going to agree just because it has to be done, not because I want to. But I just think that we need to be more efficient in how we do it from now on, because it's too shocking to just, jump to these high numbers after being at zeros for years.
Thank you. Mr. Fabrizi?
I'm not going to say much, I'm just going to say no.
Okay. You got the majority now.
Okay, thank you. The other item I'd like to talk about tonight, we did have the interventionist in the budget this year, and as we've worked through this process, we've realized that the approach that we were going to take to distribute those positions really did not align with what we were envisioning in the strategic plan, and something that we've been talking about for quite a while now in this district, and that's equitably allocating resources. So not allocating resources equally, but driving the money out on a needs basis to the schools that really need those supports. And this is actually an initiative in our strategic plan to develop a weighted or a fair funding formula, for lack of a better term, for the district, for the buildings. So tonight I have put something together that I'd like the board to consider, and instead of giving each of the elementary and middle schools one position and treat it as a one-size-fits-all, actually drill down into the numbers and provide these resources using a formula. And the formula that I'm proposing is really tied to the fair funding formula that the state put together. So if you look at the Pennsylvania formula, you can see here, and I know this is hard to see on the screen, but the state actually puts together a weighted student count, and it puts a lot of weight on students that are in poverty. So if you look at the circle there, you see that students that are in acute poverty, which is is defined as students that are in a household with incomes at 0 to 99% of the federal poverty level actually get counted in that formula as 1.6 students. Students that are in regular poverty, which is defined as 100 to 184% of the federal poverty level, those are students that qualify for free and reduced lunches, are adjusted to 1.3. And then they also have a concentrated acute poverty factor. So any district that has acute poverty over 30% in the district gets an additional adjustment of 0.3 students. They also have adjustments in there for English language learners and for charter membership. I'm not proposing to do anything with the ELL portion of that because we do fund that at the district level and we provide those resources to the buildings as necessary. That may be something we want to take a look at in the future. But tonight I just really want to focus on and are recommending that we do this exactly like the state does with the poverty numbers. So, and this is really hard to read, but we were able, we looked at the census data that the state is using to develop their funding formula, and it's actually the exact same data set they're using for this year's basic ed funding formula. And at the district, we have actually 30 census tracts, and it's hard to see, but if you look at Census Tract 1 here in the city, there's 50% of the population in acute poverty, and Census Tract 2 only has about 5%. So there's some pretty big disparities across the district. Lisa Berlin in our child accounting department was able to use our mapping software and actually identify how many students within each building are in each of those census tracts. And from there, we were able to derive a composite poverty level, both acute and regular poverty for each of our buildings. So with that, you can see Grover Cleveland with 628 students, they have 28.7% of their students in acute poverty. So with that, if I apply the same factor, 1.6, to those students, they get an additional adjustment to their weighted student count of 108 students for that acute poverty and 46 students for the students that are in regular poverty. So from there, for each of the buildings, I was able to develop a weighted student count for those. Before I move on, is there any questions on that piece? No?
Yeah, I'm good. I love it.
So using that, we took each of the building budgets and came up with a budget number for each of those buildings. We did make one small adjustment to those budgets. One of the issues with trying to do a weighted student formula is that some schools have more senior teachers, so their salaries are higher. So instead of taking actual salaries, we came up with an average salary for each of our positions and allocated that out to the building. So it took out the issue with seniority and higher salaries in those buildings. So with that, and then taking the weighted student count, we were able to identify or come up with the actual weighted budget per student. And for the elementary, you can see on average within the district, we're spending $4,100 per student on a weighted student basis. But throughout the 10 buildings, there's some pretty big disparities among our buildings as far as how much we're allocating. And the thing that really stands out to me when I look at this is the schools, for the most part, that are underfunded according to this formula. If you look at the last column there with the highlights, also are struggling academically and have low SPP scores. So based on that, it appears to me that this is a better approach to start allocating our funding across the district. So with that, on the chart on the far right, you can see here we have a number for each building. At the bottom of that elementary chart, there's a $973,000 additional dollars allocated. That's the money that we had in the budget for the elementary interventionists. So using this fair funding formula, if I were to raise the minimum budget for the elementary students on a weighted student formula to $4,050, then Deal, Edison, Jefferson, and McKinley would get additional funding, and the other buildings would not. So what I'm proposing tonight is that we do the formula this way, and what this basically does is create a hold harmless within our district where we're not taking away resources or fundings from school districts that appear to be overfunded in this proposal, but we're taking the additional funding that we do have and driving it out using the formula. And the goal here over time then would be to continue to use this formula when we have extra funding to level the playing field for all our schools.
I think this is really a great idea. I applaud you for figuring it out, and I'm all for it.
Mr. President?
Yes.
And that's the value to everybody here, to have a financial guy sitting here, not a teacher. No offense to teachers. I don't know that the teachers that I know of would have gone through or could do that. So I'm not saying that they can't do it.
I know a few teachers that will.
Well, probably, yeah, I'm just saying
Yeah.
that this is the value of having a finance guy here, so I'm very much in favor of that.
You might be able to teach us a class on that, Brian.
Well, this can count towards another 20 minutes.
There you go.
Brian, I just wish the Secretary of Education had been here to see this presentation. I'm really, really proud of you, as I told you before, because this is creative, thinking outside the box. It's what our students need, and thank you. This is great.
We've already started talking to the principals about this, and they've been receptive. One of the other things that we're looking to do with this is really give them more control over their budget. So once we establish a minimum amount and they get their budget dollars, we want them give them the ability to move that money around as they see fit to meet the goals that they've set in their building level plans, which are in turn aligned to our strategic plan. So Piper Burley, as you can see, they're the bottom school on this chart for the elementary, is pretty much in line with the district average. When I talked to Karen, she is not going to get an additional interventionist, but she already talked through it, and she looked at her staff and felt that she, because her class sizes are on the low side, could pull one of those teachers out of the classroom and make that individual an interventionist. So that's the kind of thing I'm hoping to work with the rest of the buildings on. So again, they work with their ILT team members to really allocate those positions and dollars around to meet their goals. I just want to go over very quickly too with the middle school. You can see if we use that same $4,050 per student, we pretty much level the playing field at the middle school level. Only Strong Vincent is a little bit over at that point. The big challenge that I think that we're going to face over the next couple years is the high schools. So applying that formula to Collegiate and Erie High, you can see there's a pretty big disparity right there. And in the budget that we've presented tonight, we did find through further refining the budget with Ian and Neil and John and Randy, another $387,000. So my proposal tonight is to allocate those funds to Erie High to begin to start that process of leveling the playing field at both of those buildings.
Is everybody all right with that? Have any questions?
My question with Erie High is that, how is that going to be divided between career tech and a regular track? Is that?
So that's, they've already started thinking about that. We, and Mr. Pisano and Mr. Mikowski will be involved in those discussions. Again, our goal on this next slide here is we want all of this to be driven out through the strategic plan. So as a district, we've already set non-negotiables for 1920 on math, reading, and behavior. And the buildings right now are in the process of developing their building level plans and setting goals and determining what initiatives they want to address next year. After they get those plans done, again, we're going to ask the principals and the ILT team members at each of those buildings to sit down and look at their budget. We've already developed budget templates and bring us a plan that will allocate those resources. But for us, it has to be aligned with their goals, which in turn need to be aligned with the district's strategic plan.
Will they have any professional development or training in
We're going to be
budgeting?
working on that, yes.
Okay.
So everybody's okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And then our last thing, we are going to have a executive session.
Lorda.
Yeah, but our last thing is LERTA, Mr. Polito.
At your place tonight should be a copy of the LERTA resolution that the city is,
No.
do we have that?
No, we don't.
We
had a
received it
note
in the
around.
mail.
Oh, okay, so you have
Yeah,
at your
we got it.
house a
Yeah.
copy of the resolution that, or the ordinance that the city is proposing. They are recommending, or they would like to hold 2 public hearings on this, 2 joint public hearings. The city has already agreed to hold one on May 30th from 5:30 to 7:30 at City Hall. I talked to the mayor today, and we would like to recommend that the school district host one of them. The date that seems to work with the other taxing bodies is June 12th from 9 to 11 in the morning, and I just wanted the board's permission to schedule that and have that here in one of our buildings in the district.
Yes.
Everybody all right with that?
Yes, sir.
Sounds good.
All right?
So,
Go ahead.
my question would be, the city would be just hosting it in our building, or would we have to be a part of the meeting?
Mr. Wachter?
The anticipation is that this would be a joint hearing for the purpose of having the school board participate. There is some conservative reading of the law would require the school board's participation in that hearing for the purpose of setting the boundary for the LERTA.
So will we be a part of both, or just the one here?
Both.
Both, okay.
That was the conceptual agreement that the mayor had come up with, was to have joint public hearings. Rather than have multiple public hearings on the same thing with multiple different public bodies, we're talking about having joint hearings so we can get them done at the same time.
So we would recommend that we have board representation, not necessarily a quorum at both of those hearings. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'll be there. Anybody else that wants to come?
I won't be.
I'll try.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be at the June 12th one, but not the May 30th.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're okay. Rob, did you have anything?
No, I'm available on a pinch, but other than that, I'm winding it down here.
Mr. President, I'm
Yes.
sorry, I know we passed on from the budget, and I guess I didn't realize that we were completely not talking about it anymore, but I did have a question under, and I'm working off of this, so our charter school estimate under account 562 increases 1.3 million. So I'm wondering why that increase, and if we need to have you do a little bit more data analysis for us on what we could do as a district
So
to decrease that number?
We've been very conservative this year in our estimate. One of the areas that we have historically underfunded or under budgeted on is charter enrollment or charter tuition. So this year, in addition to the 60 students that we typically see leave, we've budgeted an additional 60, so a total of 120. And that's based on some of the plans that the charter schools have for expansions. So that
Okay.
number, we're continuing to look at that number, and it may end up being reduced a little bit in the final budget. But again, I don't want to cut it too close this year, because when we look at our trend, again, we've had on average 60 kids a year leave. Right now, we only have 23 more kids in charter than we did last year at this time. But 1 year doesn't make a trend. So we,
Are these specifically special education students that are going to charter, I guess is my
we,
question?
charter mix for regular and special education students is it's roughly 85% regular and 15 special ed. Is that correct, Ian? 80/20. Okay, so when we project out, and that's for this year as well as the 30 kids going out in the plan, we use that same percentage mix to estimate what the tuition will be.
And because our charter school tuition is higher, what we have to pay, that's why there's such a difference in the amount between?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can we possibly go back and look at the numbers as far as what we're doing in special education that maybe we could improve upon so that we're not having those 20 students leaving? I mean, just want to throw that out there because that's a lot of money.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. I will say, though, that percentage is very close to what our overall percentage of regular and special ed kids, so it's
Okay.
just consistent with our population.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if nothing else, we are going to go into executive. We will go over to the room down the hallway. Ms. Mikowski, is that still open? Yes, sir. Thank you.